members, Minister. Andre, correct. Separate teams administered these contracts separately. The ABB contract from a Kusile perspective was handled by the group capital team at the time. Those officials no longer around. The ABB maintenance services for the flame scanners was a more recent transaction than the Kusile's control and instrumentation contract. So I believe the individuals or the officials would have been different. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, you're not sure if they are the same or they are different, but by virtue of being two different divisions, the possibility is that it's two different officials. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And the official who had made the overpayment, were they dealt with by ESKOM?
Honourable Member, just to clarify, this is the overpayment to ABB for the Kusile project.
That's correct. The 1 billion for the Kusile project, where there were 4 variations, Unit 1, 2 Units 1, and 2 Units 2 projects, 4 projects at Kusile.
Understood. I will ask Avin Maharaj, Project Director currently at Kusile, to respond to that one, please.
Remember, so in terms of the individuals that were involved with the particular transaction, they're no longer with ESKOM, but the SIU is pursuing those particular proceedings together with the NPA. So from an ESKOM perspective, no, none of them are currently around within the organization.
Thank you. Then it means there's no possibility that is the same official who asked for this particular deviation number 31.
Honourable Member, let us confirm that, if you don't mind. But my understanding, based on the facts currently in front of us, that it would have been a completely separate procurement team doing these 2 separate contracts. But to make absolutely sure and to ensure that we do not unintentionally mislead Parliament, let's clarify that, and if you permit us, we will revert.
Okay. And now with this particular reference 31, National Treasury says 2 years instead of 5, and you eventually find a contract of 5 years for lesser amount. Why was the market not tested before that? And that it was led by the National Treasury, in fact, forced by National Treasury to go to the market, and you even landed at a lesser price. Why wasn't it done before requesting a deviation?
Philip, if you would mind just taking us through the process, please.
Thanks, Andrew. So, Honourable Member, it had been done. So this was divided into 2 processes. The first process was to test a scanner that would work. So it was an open process. But when they tested the scanners of all the companies that were there, ABB was the scanner that they selected based on that. And then therefore they started a process, a second process, having tested the market, to then ask that ABB, they negotiate with ABB on a single source basis. So that's what had happened. They had tested the market, and then that the market had yielded at the time ABB as a company that had a successful scanner. When they did that again, after National Treasury had said no, there was then another company that also succeeded, and that's a company that has got the 5-year contract. Thanks.
So this company did not take. did not partake in the first round.
In the first round, yes, they didn't.
And they were aware of this bidding.
Chair, I would battle to say that they were aware. So that these processes were about a year apart. So one was in 2019. It was in May 2019 that they went to National Treasury, and then the second contract was placed in May 2020. So we can check what the status of the other company was at the time. Unfortunately, I don't have those facts.
Honorable Member, if I may,
okay,
just
Chair.
if I may, Honorable, just I think we just need to clarify something here. I think let's take it a step back, colleagues, if I may. CEO, maybe let's get an explanation in terms of how your deviation operations are processed within ESKOM, and who are the line fundable executives. This is that we are getting, and that does not sit well with me. Things are fall through the cracks. Just maybe do first bench of a deviation responsible for it. So that the issue around, I mean, the latest response now that which is not around because they were not aware of those facts, it goes to record keeping, which of course is another issue that we'll raise when we're dealing with the annual report. Because, yeah, particularly Chief Procurement Officer, that whole process, let's be taken through that first, so that we are on the same page in terms of how ESKOM processes these things. I'm sorry for this intervention, Honorable Member. I just think it's going to help us understand how ESKOM works.
That's fine, Chair. That's fine, Chair, because that was my next question as to what are their timeframes in terms of advertising and everything, so that everyone else is aware of their processes before they can close. It's fine, they can answer that.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, Honourable Member. We will ask, let's just see if Ntombi Zodwa is on the call. Ntombi Zodwa, if you can please explain the deviation process.
Right. So what role does she, what office does she occupy at ESKOM?
She is in the procurement department. So she's intimately familiar with the procurement process.
What role is she holding in the procurement department?
To give you her exact title.
No, I ask it, CEO, because it matters in terms of who's who and in terms of protocols and line function. So it's one thing to be there, but what role is she playing? Is she intimately involved? Oh, she can answer for herself. That's fine.
Right. Chair, if I can just check. Sorry, it's difficult with this list to see who's on the call and who isn't. It appears, and Ntombi Zodwa, if you can please raise your voice as if she's not on the call for reasons that I don't fully understand. So apologies for that.
Sorry, through you, Honourable Chairperson. Ntombi Zodwa is struggling to connect. She's trying to connect. She may be on shortly, and then she can respond to the Honourable Member's question. It's Caleb Casson speaking. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
Right, thank you,
Sure,
Caleb.
that's understandable. Where's your CPO?
Sorry, Chair, you are breaking up.
Is it either the chief procurement officer or the chief financial officer or the head of legal? Just the process embarked upon in terms of internally, how would the deviation in ESKOM be carried out? I mean, who would be transmitting it to National Treasury? Is that kind of granular detail I want to get into, because I think that's where Honorable Mente is at the moment. Because I mean, it can't be that we're going to be reliant on a person who's not here or struggling to get in. It's understandable. There's connectivity problems throughout, but it can't be that the people that are not here, none of them are familiar with this process.
All right. Thank you, Honourable Chair. Maybe Caleb, if you are able to answer. Otherwise, we can ask Mr. Peter Leroux, who is Head of Procurement for our Generation Division, to explain that.
Through you, Honourable Chairperson, I think Peter Leroux is closer to the detail because it's done through the CPO's office. And Peter, maybe you can explain it in more detail than myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. It's Peter Leroux. I am the General Manager responsible for procurement in the Generation Division. When we talk about deviations, which relate to the request of single sources or confined markets, usually the process starts with the procurement team that is driving the transaction, and specifically when the strategy of the specific transaction is starting out. When there is a request for these deviations, they need to be well motivated within the organization, because our normal process is always a process of open tender as prescribed by National Treasury and all the other regulations. So any process that is not an open process is then seen as a deviation, and very specific motivation needs to be provided. That motivation is provided in the request that goes to National Treasury. That request is written up and provided to the office of the CPO. The CPO is then personally looking at those requests for deviations. And before that comes to the submission of the CPO, it is also internally debated in the different procurement and tender committees that is operating in the whole of ESKOM, to ensure that any reason for a single source is scrutinized and that it is well motivated. So a deviation process is not started by a specific individual. It is done by the cross-functional team as defined in our policies and procedures. There must be good motivation for it, and it passes through the internal governance as well as the office of the CPO before it reaches National Treasury for approval. And that is in line with the regulations from National Treasury. I hope I've addressed the question, Honourable Member.
No, you have. Honourable, I'll come to you. But you see, we want to attach faces to these responsibilities in this process, because all that matters. So I'll come back to this. Honourable, you may proceed. I'll come back to it now. Shortly, I will still substantively deal with it. But Honourable, I'm sorry about that. You may proceed with your line of questioning.
Okay, thank you, Chair. CEO, when a deviation is requested, there is always a signature of someone who have requested it. And that someone would normally come from the office that is requesting. And now You've just made someone from procurement to speak. That's fine. Ordinarily, procurement will be the ones that are processing all these deviations between ESKOM and Treasury. However, the buck stops with you. You are the only accounting officer there, and then the accounting body of yours, which is the board. Now, when we don't have anyone on the floor, you will have to give us the details, because you are the overall accounting officer. Now, where ABB is concerned, the reason why we want to know so many things. Here you reported one. That is why earlier on I was saying there are 2 deviations on Q1. But seemingly, you did not report everything. You'd recall there was a deviation made to Treasury by the same ABB, recommending the same ABB. And I hope now this particular official is on the floor, because here the problem is the process. For National Treasury to be saying, no, go and do this instead of that, knowing very well that the reason why ESKOM is where it is today is due to the fact that people did not test the market, and many other things happened where prices ended up being inflated. Now, here is another letter that I found amongst the letters you sent us when you came just in October with the package you sent us. And that was also ABB, request for approval to solicit services from a single source for the transfer of all generator and transformer protection functions to a new digital protection system project. I think this one now is not the same as the one of the oil and services of oil flame scanners. Is it the same, CEO?
Honourable Member, no, it's not the same. But again, just to reiterate, what we reflect in the presentation here is for the FY 19-20 financial year. And it may be that the document that you're referring to is for the 2021 financial year, and that is why it's not reflected in this presentation.
Or you left this one for the next batch of your deviations?
Yes, correct.
We'll deal with it in the next batch. Then let's go to the next deviation. Which was now on Q3. And your status on this one says you are finalizing the project after the National Treasury have rejected your deviation and directed you to the market. Now take us through what forces you and your department to go a deviation route instead of doing what is prescribed and not use the deviation is used when there is an amount of a pressure that you cannot take or emergency kind of a thing. Now Treasury says, no, go and test the market. You test the market, the process is being finalized. Wouldn't this process be finalized long time if you had not wasted the months, the 2-3 months of the to and from between you and National Treasury, knowing that the deviation you are requesting was not in line with even the deviation prescripts? Why the insistence on asking for a deviation instead of doing the right thing?
Honourable Member, in this particular instance, what happened was that there were two original equipment manufacturers for the particular pulse jet fabric filters. These are very large filter bags that are used for emission control in our power stations. From a technical perspective, we deemed it appropriate for us to use the same fabric filter bags that had been issued when these power stations or when this original emission control equipment was commissioned. And DTI then suggested that we should look also at alternative suppliers, including local content, and that is what we then did. Again, I'm going to ask Mr. Peter Leroux, as he was intimately involved in this project, to give greater granularity on the thinking at the time and the process that was followed.
Thank you, CEO. To the Honourable Member, in this particular case, DTI issued an instruction to say we should buy our fabric filter bags with 100% local content. Now, DTI then had to approve the suppliers that can do the 100% local content, and that 100% local content does, at that point in time, only included these two suppliers. So DTI at that point in time only approved these two suppliers. So it was with the backing of the DTI request that we asked for a deviation to go out to the confined market due to the designation of bags to procure from 100% local on the market. The response that we got from National Treasury is that we should test the market and go on an open inquiry. In this particular case, we then did so on the request of National Treasury, and the initial tender then, which was Corp 4979, was issued on the 7th of May and closed on the 3rd of June 2020. 5 responses was received from the market, but unfortunately all of the 5 responses were non-responsive. And the reason why they were non-responsive is that the material for the fabric filter bags are still needed to be imported, and there's no capacity in South Africa for that material. And DTI needed to provide exemption letters to all the potential suppliers for that portion, which accounts to almost 30% of the total tender value. And none of the suppliers, not even the 2 that has been approved by DTI at that point in time, has had the necessary exemption letters. After meetings with DTI on this matter, the tender was reissued to the open market again on the 19th of June. It closed on the 20th of July. And in that particular process, there was 2 successful bidders that is currently under evaluation for the potential of awarding this contract during the coming months. So, Chair, I think that, Honourable Member, that should address the question.
I am fine, Chairperson. Back to you. Thank you very much.
All right, honourable members, we will come to you. It's right. Honourable Dirks, you've indicated you've got a question. Colleagues, please indicate in the group and not deviate from our standard operating procedure. Right, Honourable Dirks. And then Honourable Maoto.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson, for this opportunity, Chair. Chair, I just need to find out something here. Honourable Mente is raising some very important issues here about these deviations. Now, I won't go into it, but personally, I don't think the answers we received was satisfactory. Now, I went onto the platform while the CEO was answering all these questions, I went on the platform to see who from the department is here, and I do not see the Chief Procurement Officer of ESKOM on the platform. Now, surely, when we deal with such important issues about these deviations, which we are not getting really satisfactory answers to, surely the Chief Procurement Officer was supposed to be here to answer some of these questions. What is going on? Why is the CEO answering? Where's the Chief Procurement Officer? Because I think this thing falls squarely on him. He must come and answer. Why is he not here, Chair? Or is he on the platform? I'm not seeing him, but he has not responded to any of the questions. CEO have been asking him. I don't see him on the platform. What's going on, Chair? Thank you.
All right. Let's get a response to that. You've read my mind. Right. CEO.
Chair, 2 comments. First of all, the Chief Procurement Officer has submitted a medical certificate saying that he is unable to attend, so that can be shared with you. Secondly, we have issued, as of yesterday, disciplinary charges against the CPO, Mr. Solly Chichangano, and in terms of those charges, he has been provisionally suspended.
Chair.
Yeah, you asked about.
I have a serious problem with this, Chair. Chair, the CEO, the Chief Procurement Officer now conveniently got a letter, and the doctor's letter, and then we now hear about a suspension and disciplinary hearings. I would have loved to hear what that man has to say. He has been at the helm of this procurement. I would like to hear what he has to say. I don't like this one-sided stories where we get fed a one-sided narrative of the department. I want to hear what is happening in that department. With this kind of response I'm receiving from Mendes answers questions does not give me any comfort. Because we need to hear, I need to hear what that man's got to say. He was in charge, he must come and answer. Okay. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, that does put us now in a very difficult position, and it explains why I was uneasy about the manner in which responses were coming. But this now clarifies that why we are here. All right, Honorable Maotwe, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Just please, colleagues, please indicate if you've got questions. Right, Honorable Maotwe, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. And I also want to register my disappointment with regards to the way the answers have been coming through from the CEO and the officials from ESKOM. I want us to go back to slide 30 of the presentation that I have, which talks about ABB. I have not heard the reasoning behind the value changing on the presentation now from 8 billion to 38.5 million. I did not get that. Overnight, the amount has now changed on the presentation. Who prepared this presentation that shows 8 billion rands, and who changed it and why? That's the first question. Chair, I don't know if I should ask all the questions or they're going to be answered one by one.
One question, one response when we're doing a hearing. So we keep the questions brief and succinct. Right, let's get that response.
Philip, can you maybe explain the discrepancy? I think it was a typo that crept in between the version that got distributed and the number that is currently on the screen.
Yes, Chair. So the number that is on the screen is a correct number. The number that was there before, that was an incorrect number, and I assume it was a typo. But this number we have checked, and it also links in with the final amount, which is 39 million rands. Thanks.
Honorable, you can come in.
Yeah,
It's one hell of a discrepancy.
it is. I mean, this one had, yeah, Chair, you'll rule on it, but really, it can't be. We can't take it. Let me move on. My second question is, can ESKOM with absolute certainty confirm that the spec for these tenders were not done by the very same suppliers? So can we get confirmation that the specification that was written by ESKOM employees and not by ABB and this other company that you wanted to contract?
Philip, if you can comment on the spec, please.
Yes, Chair. So the spec was done by ESKOM employees. Excuse me, not by ABB. ABB had been part of the companies that tendered, and as I indicated, at first the intention was to test for these flame scanners from 3 companies. 2 companies did manage to test, and ABB then was selected in the first part. In the second part, the ABB did not get the tender, so the spec had been written by ESKOM engineers.
Okay, that's fine, Chair. I'll pause for now.
All right. Honorable Mentor, you may come in.
Well, Chair, there's something that I do not understand, which the CEO just gave as an answer to Honorable Dirks. That one Chief Procurement Officer had submitted a sick note, but on the same vein, there is a disciplinary hearing. They can't be together. You can't, if ever you are suspended and you are undergoing DC, then you cannot issue a sick note. Which one of the two? Can we get a direct one? Which one of the two? Because if he had submitted a sick note, then it means we can then call the Chief Procurement Officer for next week. When they come next week, they come with the Chief Procurement Officer to answer on these questions that we're not satisfied with. Thank you.
Yeah, I think let's get clarity on that. Is the CPO not here because he's on sick leave, or he's not here because he's been suspended?
No, he's not here because he's been suspended, Honourable Chair.
Okay, he's not here because he's indisposed.
No, Chair. Can I come in, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Chair, as I'm hearing, he's not here because he's suspended, not because he's indisposed. He's not here because he's suspended. And if I heard correctly, he was suspended yesterday. If I heard correctly, I stand corrected. Now, you see, Chair, this kind of thing, I'm not prepared to accept this here, Chair. You see, Chair, whether this committee have the right to call any citizen of this country to come and appear before it, and that is the right of every portfolio committee of Parliament. Can call anybody, whether you work for government, whether you an ordinary citizen, whether you live in a rural area, we can summons you to come here. And Chair, I want that procurement officer, that Chief Procurement Officer to come here. Suspension does not give him the right not to come and appear and come and answer some of these things that happened while he was there. We want to hear all sides of what the story of what is going on at ESKOM. Because I said that the issues that Honourable Mentor raised is very critical, and I'm not happy with those answers, but I do not want to go into it at this point in time, those answers that was given. I don't think those answers are satisfactory that was given on the questions that was raised by Honourable Mentor. Therefore, that procurement officer, whether it's suspended or not, we have the powers to call him here, and he must come here and explain to us some of the issues that was raised, and some of the other issues that we still want to raise, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no, it's fine. We will look into that. If his suspension is not materially linked to the issues at hand, and he remains part and parcel of the employ and establishment of ESKOM. We will look at the modalities of that. Mam Dolashe?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Good evening, colleagues, Minister, and your team. Honorable Chairperson, my question is in the quarter 2, where you have South 32, and in South 32, you are given the original contract value. However, the value of contract extension is not being mentioned. And of course, we are noting that it was also not supported. Even the time is not mentioned as well. Now, Chair, I just want to hear, when did ESKOM apply for a deviation for the South 32 contract? Because according to ESKOM presentation, early warning signs is supposed to indicate contract which will expire 6 months before the expiry date. Now, I can't make sense with what is taking place in quarter 2 under South 32. If the team can really give me more information about that, because as I'm looking at it, it sounds very suspicious. Can we get more on this, please, Honorable Chairperson?
All right, that's fine. Let's get a response to that.
All right, Chair, we're just finding the correct slide dealing with South 32.
I think it's that last one, slide 46.
Chair, the reason that we haven't dealt with it is that was an expansion and not a deviation.
Okay, we'll come to that. Yeah, I think the waters have been somewhat muddied by what we have just been told, because I would have imagined that was something which could have just been indicated from the beginning. And then maybe it leads me to the next question, and then we can go to expansions, colleagues. I just want us to flag the issue of deviations momentarily. Are there any other officials who are suspended, who ordinarily should have been part of this meeting or are intricately involved in the work that we are dealing with in one way or the other?
No.
And whether the suspension without going into a pending disciplinary matter is materially linked to the issues that we are dealing with, or ordinarily with matters of expansions and deviations, so that we just are clear in terms of how our probing will go, so that we don't compromise process.
No,
I hope
Honourable
I'm
Chair.
making sense.
No, yes, Honourable Chair, you are making sense. There is no further officials that are suspended that in the ordinary course of events would be required to make submissions or presentations to SCOPA.
Okay.
Chair, I've had my hand up.
Fine. We will.
Can I come in?
You are not, Mr. Over to you. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, I just want to point out 3 things. The first is that the questions that you are asking are very useful, because it guides ESKOM in terms of the level of information that is required, what you call the nitty-gritty. And what we will ensure is that both the processes and the individuals and how procurement works within ESKOM can be set out very easily and transparently in a document and make it available to you. I don't think ESKOM was aware that that was part of the brief. So the questions are useful, and I can assure you of maximum transparency in that regard. The second thing is that the suspension of the CPO is a separate disciplinary matter. I'm not aware of all the details, but it's a process that any organization would be entitled to pursue within its own right and in accordance with the law, if they think that there's a basis to do it, and let the disciplinary processes finish that ESKOM has in mind, and then you will know the results of that. I'm sure Parliament nor I want to be seen to be interfering with that process. The third is that for each of these instances, Chair, perhaps when we get to both supplying more information here, but the next round, ESKOM will be better informed, as we must guide other entities as well to prepare at the level that you require. So your guidance, I think, will be very helpful to say, prepare for the level of detail that you actually require. And I think Honorable Dirks is right. Anybody can be called before a committee. And perhaps we must actually call the culprits who left ESKOM in the mess that it is in, and that we are trying to solve at this point in time. That was done partly in the old Public Enterprises Committee in 2017. There's a report that arises from that. But that's if there are further issues, I think we must get them to account for what is happening. But then you have the Zondo Commission, and you have some people in court. As one set of people appeared today that is also looking into this process as well. So to sum up, we are much better informed about what the committee requires now, and will guide other SOEs in a similar direction. Thank you.
All right. No, I don't think fundamentally, materially, we are speaking past each other, and I don't think there's on our part a view to interfere. But it's just that some of these things should not be unearthed in the course of the hearing. Ordinarily, if the CPO is not around, as we had him the last time, in fact, I was not aware of that, but it sat uncomfortably with me in terms of how the responses were coming. And that's why I posed the question that I did. I think Honorable Dirks latched on that and was putting his question. We're not going to interfere with the process. We are not a player and a referee. And over time, I'm sure that when the State Capture Commission has concluded its work, we will then fill in the gaps insofar as if there's a need for further inquiries into ESKOM. So that matter, Minister, I think we are in agreement with that. It's just a matter of outlook and time. We do want to get to the bottom of all the issues and how and build on what the previous Public Enterprises Committee did and what the State Capture Commission will come up with. Definitely. But I think that ordinarily it would have been just easier to tell us that, look, we are here and the CPO is not around, when we would walk past it. I see Honorable Dirks, you've got your hand up in the group.
Yes,
Honorable Dirks.
Yes, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson.
And I don't want to... Yes.
Chair. Yes, Chair. Chair, when I say that we must call the Chief Procurement Officer, I do not want to discuss any disciplinary matter of his at this level, at the SCOPA level. I'm not interested in these disciplinary matters. That is what ESKOM must deal with. I need him to appear in order for him to account for some of these deviations that took place while he was the Chief Executive Officer. That's what I want him to come and account. I'm not interested in the disciplinary process. That's the process that we must run there separately, and which ESKOM must deal with. We have no intention of interfering in any disciplinary hearings, but he is the most appropriate person to account for these things that we are dealing with today. And that's why I want him to come here to some time or the other. And then yes, as the Minister said, perhaps we must call the people that was previously in charge. Yes, I would love that, Chair, that this committee discuss it. We must perhaps bring Mr. Koko here, and we must bring Mr. Prime Molefe here, Perhaps we can complete the evidence that was cut short at the Zondo Commission, which he did not complete. I do not know when will he be called back to continue his evidence, because he's still under oath as it is, as we speak here, but he's not been called back there. So yes, by all means, we must call them here to this committee. We must interrogate them here so that we can get to the bottom of what's happening and what happened at ESKOM, what is going on currently at ESKOM, because we know a lot of things that are currently happening at ESKOM, and we must deal with it, Chair. Yes, by all means, we can call them, Chair. Thank you.
All right, let's not make this substantively and substantially a central part of the engagement tonight. We've unearthed it. Honorable Van Minen will handle it for us next week, Wednesday. All right, Honorable Hadebe.
Thank you, Chair. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. You may proceed.
Yeah, no, my apologies, Chair. I've been in the bus from Parliament.
Oh, yes, you were in the 16. Yes, yes.
Yeah, yes. So I could not participate and capture some of the things. I just got home now, but I got sense of what was happening. And I was interested in this unnecessary saga that has just been created of a suspension and a doctor's note. And now what immediately came into my mind is that the report that we're dealing with, who compiled the report and who ought to have compiled it? Was it the suspended person under his delegation, or it was someone else who compiled the report? Because if I heard correctly, that the suspension was only effected yesterday. And the last part, I think the issue of the doctor's note was not necessary if the man was suspended, and it was raised, I don't know for what good reason, and now it created a lot of uncertainty. And one was interested, since the matter has been raised, which came first? Was it the letter, doctor's note, or the suspension? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yeah, I hear you. The question about who crafted the report is important. But look, let's not make this the central theme.
Yeah.
Let's park this. It's got the risk of derailing us. We will keep it on the radar. In the end, I'm sure we'll come back to it. Maybe let's do that.
Let me tell you where my question emanates from. I think it's Honorable Maud who questioned the editing on the 11th hour of the numbers.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, I hear you.
You get my point?
I hear
yeah. You. So I wanted to say, was it edited by the original author? Because I'm asking here so that we deal with authentic information at our disposal.
That does become substantially correct. All right, let's get a response to that.
Right, Honourable Chair, Honourable Tlengwa, there are about 3,000 people involved in procurement in ESKOM, so it's a big department spread throughout the organisation. Because the interface with National Treasury is such an important interface, there is a register that is kept up to date and maintained in the procurement team, containing all of the details of the various deviations and expansions. And then as we receive responses on those deviations and expansions from National Treasury, that register is updated on a real-time basis. Now, what happened here, and this is very regrettable, and I apologize for it, is that in transposing the information from this register to the PowerPoint slide presentation that you've got, unfortunately, and a transcription error was made, which has led to this unfortunate mistake. So the amount of 38.5 million is the correct amount and not the amount reflected on the original slide pack. So apologies for that unfortunate mistake.
Okay, I think we are fine with that. Mam Dolashe, can you take us? I'm checking. All right. Okay, just 1 second. All right, Honorable Van Minen will be the last one on this matter. And Mam Dolashe. Oh, then CEO will start.
Apology, Chair. My apology, Chair. My question was not answered.
Okay.
I understand the nitty-gritties of people involved, but I ask who compiled the report and who edited the discrepancies in terms of the report before us. Because I understand perfectly that there are several departments engaged and that feeds the information, but there's one author that will compile all the information and compile the report that is before us.
Okay.
Right. The report is compiled by our government relations and regulatory team, and they are responsible for the drafting of the presentation. In view of the information requested and the speed at which this presentation was prepared, I think in this one instance there was a mistake that was made, and that mistake slipped through our quality control processes. So, Honourable Chair, as the accounting officer, I'll take the blame for that one. It was something that I should have picked up in my perusal of the documents before they were submitted to SCOPA. So my apologies for that.
All right, let's leave that at that for now. Honourable Latebi, just park it. Honourable Van Minen, you'll be the last one on this one, and then if there's any other matters related to this, we will come back to it at the end. So I'm not closing it, I'm just going to put it on hold momentarily. Honourable Van Minen.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is really about the process that unfolded this morning when we were informed that we were going to be dealing with a number of things, including investigations. And I just want to point out that the Auditor General recommendations do particularly note the issue of procurement. So I think that we will need to deal with that next week extensively when we get to that section, because it is something that has already very much been noted. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, no, that's fine. Let's park that for you, Honourable Van Minen, next week, because we are going to be meeting. All right, CEO, I think we are still doing well on time. Let's go through the expansions, and then Mam Dolashe, you will come in after that, and then colleagues, you will come in for that. I've noted all the other comments that have been made, but let us momentarily come back to the agenda. Not that the other matters are not important. They are. We're noting all of them. All right, CEO, expansions.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So this is for the ACTOM modification, contract modification. If I can ask Becky Nkumalo again to take us through this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this one is with regard to one of our suppliers, which is ACTOM at Kusile. It is supplying the unit transformers for all 6 units at Kusile. So this was a deviation for extension of time only that was being requested from National Treasury. The background into this company, Chair, it was due to the delay that was caused to this specific company by other suppliers, mainly the civil contractors. which then did not allow it time to start, because this contract is for the supply of these transformers, and then at the end of the installation, and then come back and commission it by this supplier. So because of the civil contractor that was late, civil contractor being the JV of KCW, they delayed this contractor, and then we needed then to ask for an extension for time, which was not then supported by the National Treasury Review, being that the request was submitted. The contract was expiring in December of 2018, and then in October, the request was made to National Treasury, and then they've asked, they've only approved it for 1 month up to the 11th of December. And then they've asked for a detailed document for supporting in terms of what has happened, which were then submitted. Unfortunately, then the contract then lapsed before that process, but the contractor that caused this problem, which is the civil contractor, we have then dealt with it in terms of contracts, in terms of the delay damages. We have penalized that contractor up to the tune of 190 million rand, for which was the maximum allowed in that contract for causing these delays. But this contractor, specifically Uptom, was entitled to time extension because they didn't cause the delays, Chair. So that is the background on this one, Chair. And then because then the contract lapses after that, we were then asked to follow the condonation process. But this contractor claim was illegitimate, and then the civil contractor was the one that caused this delay for this company, Chair. Thanks.
We are going through all the expansions, so and then we'll come back for questions.
Right, thank you. Let's move on then to the next expansion. Right, Tlakula Occupational Health Services. This was for an expansion by 1.8 million rand. Philip, if you can handle that one, please.
So, Chair, this one, it was a request to National Treasury in order for the business continuity to be maintained, that we could continue with the same supplier. But and the original value was 3 million rand. So the intention was to then request an extension of time, which would taken the expansion by value to 1.8 million rand. And National Treasury did not support it. And the National Treasury requested that a new contract is established. So the contract expired in December. And at this stage, in December 2019, and at this stage, the employees are being serviced by using internal occupational health resources that are based at Megawatt Park and also at other generation sites. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Let's move on to the next one, please. Construction at Majuba. Becky again.
Thank you, Chair. This was the request for the modification at Majuba for SSP4P joint venture, which was responsible for the construction of the 2 rail lines at Majuba power station. So the reason for the delays there is that the work that they were busy with needed to tie in with the power station, and then the power station could not grant them the outage to to interface with the station for this project to be completed. So the request was then sent out to ask for an extension of 5 months with the cost increase of that contract, so that the same contract that was doing the work could still continue to finalize the work, Chair. And then that request was not supported, Chair. And then we subsequently, then following that, National Treasury went out to the market. We had to go out twice. And then by July last year, we managed to conclude the contract with the supplier there, which then this work was completed last year in December, and currently the contractor is busy with the commissioning and fixing the construction defect, Chair. So this contract work is completed now at Mature. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Then let's move on. ATKSS, Becky again.
Thank you, Chair. This project is a project that we are doing for the alternate supplier to Quebec. So what happened on this project, Chair, we had a contract with Group 5, and then in March of 2019, Group 5 then informed us that they are going on a business rescue, and then the security service was part of the Group 5 contract. And then they gave us 1 month notice for security that they were going to terminate it by the end of April in 2019. So that on its own, Chair, did not give us enough time to go into the market. So we needed to make the plan. And then while in that space as well, then Group 5, by the 5th of April of that month, they then came back and changed. They say they are terminating the service of security. So we then obtained advice from Group Security at head office that there is this 2RM security company which was rendering service at Quebec at the time, because that was the nearest company that was on the database. It's part of the process as well at ESKOM, that if the emergency does arise, we can look at any contract that can do the service that is currently contracted. So then through emergency, we procure the services of this contractor from Quebec to come and support this project. And then during that same period as well, there was a national contract that was being put at head office, which was supposed to start by end of July. So then we put a contract from April to end of July with this supplier. Then unfortunately, then there were delays with the national contract from head office, which resulted into 2 months delay from beginning of August until September when this contract was established. So then we needed, because it was the second extension, and then of that value, we needed to go to National Treasury, so it was not supported. So based on that, then we needed to follow the condonation process. But this one was mainly due to time and the delay of the national contract. So after the national contract was established, then we then moved to the national contract, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Natasha, who's handling this one? Physical security.
Chief, is Ezekiel who's supposed to present this one. I'm not sure whether it's connected.
All right.
Through you, Honorable Chairperson, Andre, I think Ntobi Zodwa can deal with this. She knows the issues. I think she's online. Thanks, Honorable Chairperson.
Right, may we get a response, please? Or I mean, speak to this, colleagues.
Chairman, apologies. This is Homocho Skippers. Andrea, I do believe that Ezekiel is connected. If he could be allowed to proceed, please. Thank you.
Yeah, but he just now said Dom Zodwa must do that. What's going on?
No, we're just trying to overcome some of the connectivity issues, Chair. But if Ezekiel is online, then he is the designated official to handle this. Ezekiel, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, this modification request was for the national contracts which were established before the August 2019 national contract. Basically, the request that was leveled with National Treasury was a request for a modification of the contracts from the 1st of August to the end of September. And it was in view of the delays to the placement of the national contract for security services. Now, basically what happened, the information for all the contracts within ESKOM was consolidated, and the request was leveled with National Treasury on the 31st of July with a request for an expansion of the contracts from the 1st of August to the end of September. And National Treasury declined the request, citing that the request was received late. But basically, the contracts were expiring on the 30th of July, on the 31st of July, which was on the eve of the move. So that request with National Treasury was leveled the same day before the expiry of the contract. But because the email that was sent to National Treasury was received the following day, the National Treasury cited a rejection to the request, basing it on the fact that it was a post facto request. Chair, that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Ezekiel. Let's move on. All right, catering services. Philip.
Thank you, Chair. So this happened at Hendrina Power Station, and this contract was for provision of catering services, essentially feeding of about 700 to 800 employees at Hendrina Power Station. This was a 3-year contract. However, funds were depleted on the contract about 9 months before the end of the contract. It was established that some additional items were added onto the contract, although they had not been authorized. So there was then a request to National Treasury to allow more funds onto the contract. That was not supported by National Treasury, or it was not approved by National Treasury. So there is a condonation process that has started, and in fact we've done an investigation on this. Disciplinary action has been taken against the contract manager who allowed this to happen. And at this stage, after the contract expired, there was another contract that has now been placed, and that contract is currently running. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Philip. Next one. Right. This is the South 32 expansion. Snell, if you can handle that one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, honourable members, ministers, and ESKOM team. With regards to this one, if I can just give some background, and they're interrelated to the last slide on this presentation pack as well. If I can explain the background. So basically, ESKOM has a long-term coal supply agreement with South African Energy Coal, which is a subsidiary of South 32, to supply coal to Duva Power Station. This is a 10 million ton contract per annum, and with an option to extend all the way to 2034. So prior to the 1990s, this was a cost-plus coal supply agreement. And in the 1990s, this was converted to a fixed-price coal supply agreement. Now, the fixed-price coal supply agreement that I refer to, the one that was concluded in 1994, was amended 4 times. It was amended in May 2012, where there was an extension of the coal supply agreement, the qualities were tightened, and there was a new base price that was set. And then there was 3 other amendments in 2013, 2015, and 2016 that were just amendments of basically the contractual provisions, but not necessarily a movement in price. Now, Chairperson, in June 2018, South 32 informed ESKOM of its intent to sell South African Energy Coal. It's one of its subsidiaries. And the Duva Coal Supply Agreement, or the colliery that supplies Duva Power Station, is housed under the South African Energy Coal subsidiary, amongst other collieries as well. In June 2019, South 32 declared hardship as well, or South African Energy Coal declared hardship on the Duva Coal Supply Agreement. So on the basis of them wanting to sell, and on the basis of them declaring hardship, ESKOM appointed consultants to perform 2 exercises. The first exercise, Chairperson, was to verify or assess the hardship claim, and this was completed in around June, July 2020. And the second exercise was to perform a due diligence on the sale. This is the sale of South African Energy Coal. And Chairperson, that was completed in January 2021. So, and this is important context, because while the consultants that we had employed were conducting the above exercises, ESKOM in November 2019 applied to National Treasury to modify or to expand the long-term Duva Coal Supply Agreement for an interim price relief to South 32 for 6 months, while the consultants that we had hired were completing the exercise that I've outlined above. And that was for a 6-month interim relief for about 5 million tons of coal. National Treasury Chairperson rejected this application initially on the 14th of November. ESKOM then reapplied on the 6th of February 2020, and National Treasury approved on the 28th of February. So Chairperson, this deviation is what's on the slide in front of you under the financial year 2020. In the box at the bottom, I give further context, and it's important because it leads into the slide at the end, or the slide on the big amount. So if I can just give context on that also. So in FY21, so on the 30th of June 2020, ESKOM made a further application to National Treasury to increase the above interim price relief that we had initially sought for 6 months for another 9 months, from 1 November to 31 July 2021, amounting to another 1.9 billion rand. And that's not on the slide, but in future, if you see it again, because this is only showing you the expansions and deviations for FY 2020. So if you see this in future, you'll understand the context behind it. So there was a further 1.9 billion rand, call it interim price relief expansion, which is not on the slide. And that application, Chairperson, was made in June 2020, and National Treasury approved that in July 2020. So, Chairperson, the above applications allow coal to be supplied to Durban Power Station, while the assessments, discussions, call it the hardship verifications and the due diligence and the way forwards were being contemplated. And Chairperson, that explains this part of the expansion related to South 32. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Snell. Let's move on. Again, this deals with IT, so if I can ask Faith Byrne to handle this one, please, Faith.
Thank you, Chair. End of October 2018, we went out an RFP for our data links. That contract was awarded in December 2019. It was awarded to Liquid Telecoms, Dark Fiber Africa, MTN, and Vodacom. As we were onboarding these suppliers, the MTN, who was awarded the Dark Fiber link as a redundant link, they responded to us by saying that they are unable to provide us with this link, which they had actually responded to in the RFP. They said that they did not have the capability. We then approached INTI for allocating this service to Dark Fiber Africa. And the reason why we did that is we needed to have redundancy. And so to have redundancy, we couldn't award it to Liquid Telecoms, because if Liquid Telecoms had a failure, then we would have a complete failure and we wouldn't have a backup. And Liquid Telecoms were the only other service provider that had the Dark Fiber links. For that reason, we asked INTI for the awarding it to Dark Fiber. INTI did not support that and had asked us to go out on a closed bid. We appealed that, but whilst we were appealing that, we did go out on this closed bid. And subsequently, as we were going through the appeal process, which took longer than what we anticipated, we got to a stage in that in our tender, we ran the closed bid simultaneously, and we got to a stage where we were able to finalize that, and so we withdrew our appeal from INTI. In this process, this closed bid process, we was then awarded to Dark Fiber Africa, and that contract was implemented in January of this year. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you very much, Faith. Let's move on to the next one. Right. Procurement of CO2 analyzer gas services. Philip.
So in 2019, there was an environmental audit that found that CO2 analyzers were extensively damaged. So at that stage, the power station requested a quotation, or they went out in an RFQ, a request for quotation for the collection of the gas analyzers, the transcripts and assessed. And then once the damage had been assessed, it would an ESKOM would decide how to handle it going forward. But during that time, the supplier stripped, and they found that it was extensive damage, and then they started with the repairs. And in fact, they sent the analyzers to Germany for repairs, and this was done without reference or formal approval from ESKOM. And then they came back and they were asking for an additional 621,000 rands for the repairs. So this was requested to National Treasury. National Treasury did not approve. So, Chair, this is currently under investigation. We've asked ANF to do an investigation to see whether there was any wrongdoing as to who exactly issued the instruction for the work to be done on the ESKOM side. And once that is done, we'll be able to take appropriate action for the work. So the contractor, the supplier was paid the amount, and so we need, then we'll be submitting that condonation with the appropriate action that will be taken against whoever has flouted the rules on our side. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Philip. Next one, please. I think the next one is Duva again. So this is a large deviation which accounts for the bulk of the National Treasury reported expansions, apologies. And these, because of the magnitude of this particular expansion, we deemed it appropriate to submit this report to SCOPA for its consideration. Snell Nagar, who is our acting head of primary energy, will deal with this one. Snell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, thank you, Andre. So if I can remind you again, Chairperson and members, there is currently a long-term contract to supply coal to Duva Power Station, which was historically amended. And I gave you some details on the historical amendment earlier. So in June 2019, which I mentioned earlier as well, South 32 or South African Energy Coal declared hardship on the Duva Coal Supply Agreement. And I had said earlier that ESKOM appointed consultants to verify that hardship claim. So, Chairperson, the basis of South African Energy Coal's hardship claim around the Duva contract revolved around the following issues: that they are incurring losses or huge financial losses, and that the losses are being incurred, or the losses being incurred are a consequence of a material change of circumstances which prevailed at the time of entering into the coal supply agreement. Now, Chairperson, there's a clause in the current coal supply agreement, I think it's clause 22, which basically states that when circumstances change which inflict undue hardship to either party, both parties will sit down and negotiate. However, based on the results of the hardship verification that our consultants did for ESKOM, ESKOM's view was that there was a first amendment done in 2012, and thus any hardship that would have potentially existed at the beginning of the contract or material circumstances that would have changed would have been captured in 2012, and hence, any hardship should have already been catered for. And this is amongst a whole lot of other issues as well, which I'm not going to get into the details of now. But suffice to say, ESKOM's consultants verified that there is financial distress at Duva Colliery, but not hardship per the definition of the contract. And just important to note that obviously South African Energy Coal disagrees with ESKOM's viewpoint on this particular matter. But Chairperson, this is important. If there was a valid hardship claim, then this could have been resolved within the construct of the current contract, and that contemplated in terms of the hardship clause. ESKOM had a different view, and important, but there was financial distress at that mine, and this has to be resolved. So, Chairperson, as guided by our consultants, the thinking at the time around June was that a new 14-year agreement, which is the life of Duva Power Station, for 10 million tons per annum, which is in terms or as per the current coal supply agreement, be negotiated with South 32, meaning we don't amend the current coal supply agreement. And there were a number of reasons for that. As I've given you feedback earlier, this particular coal supply agreement was previously a cost-plus mine, which was converted to a fixed-price mine. So there are some legacy liabilities that come with the contract. And ESKOM also felt, as guided by our consultants, that we should better protect ourselves if we were going to supply or renegotiate a coal supply agreement due to financial distress, that we should better protect ourselves going into the future. So, Chairperson, therefore, ESKOM applied to National Treasury to renegotiate a contract and hence the request to deviate from open tender. ESKOM applied on the 23rd of July for this, and National Treasury rejected this application on the 19th of October. That is the basis of the 67 billion rand application in front of you. And Chairperson, if I can upfront and profusely apologize that the title of this slide says expansion, it should have been deviation. This is a deviation request, and the application to National Treasury was a deviation. Chairperson, that is the application in front of you for the deviation. I just want to give you further context to what's happening with this particular transaction, because it is a material transaction. So post the 67 billion rand application to National Treasury and post National Treasury declining ESKOM's application, there have been further developments which you'll see in the future. And if I can also just upfront caveat that the feedback I'm about to give you has not been ventilated at the ESKOM board. So it could change based on the approvals that occur at ESKOM structures. But this is just to give you context of where this transaction is going. So the ESKOM, like I said, the ESKOM board is not ventilated on these issues. Sub-32 have notified ESKOM of selling this, selling South African Energy Coal to a subsidiary called Tabong Pty Limited, which is, a company called Tabong Pty Limited, which is a subsidiary of Seriti Resources. So after discussions with Sub-32, the consultants, and the reviews that took place, it appears that there's a possibility of mining this resource for another 4 years at an economical, call it, cost. And thereafter, from like 2024 to 2034, if we want to maintain, or if they want to maintain the supply at those volumes, there is a substantial amount of capital that's required, and the operating cost to mine those reserves is significantly higher. So ESKOM is thus presenting this business case through to its governance structures. When and if that business case gets approved, we would be making a different application to NT in the future. So it just to also give the members further information, ESKOM has gone out on RFP for a longer term coal supply option to Duba. This is all the way to 2034. And this RFP will inform Duva's long-term coal supply solutions that will be taken into account. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Snell, and thank you, Chair. This brings us to the end of the presentation. So if we can now take questions, we hand back to you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, Mamdulasha, you were right. The last one was a deviation, and you were correct to have raised it then. But we were waiting for the explanation to come through. So let's hand over to Mamdulasha, and we'll follow the same process. When she's done, she will indicate, and then colleagues, you will be able to comment. So Mamdulasha, will hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, like the CEO explained the issue of ESKOM Limited contractor. I'm not sure whether he made mention of the fact that that contract was declared irregular by the AG. Because the contract had expired at the time of the request. Now, I want to know, Honorable Chair, why ESKOM wait until the contract has expired to apply for the expansion? Is it because of the no proper contract management that exists? Because for us, ESKOM was supposed to have been able to identify the expiring date in that contract and apply for them timelessly. Why was this not done, Chair? I did not hear the CEO explaining into that one. If he can please give us more information insofar as this matter is concerned.
Thank you, Chair. If I can ask Becky Nkumalo and maybe Avin Maharaj can also come in on this one to explain the process.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start with Chair. Honourable Member, I take note of what you said. I think the contract management, the process, there is a process internally within ESKOM because of the value of this contract. It also needed to get the board approval, and then only after then we can then go and approach National Treasury. So which was done in October of 2018. And like I've indicated, Chair, unfortunately, National Treasury only gave us 1 month extension, and then they asked for quite a bit of information that we needed to submit to them. And then there was a transition during that time, end of December. Then I think that's when the contract then elapsed, that extension that was given by National Treasury, which then started the condonation process, Chair. Maybe Avin can come in as well from the, if there's additions that you want.
Thank you, Becky. Honourable Member, to confirm, so the submission to National Treasury was done within 2 weeks after the approval by the ESKOM board. That was the exact date of the submission was 31st of October. Mr. Nkumalo's mentioned the National Treasury at that point in time only granted the additional a 1 month extension up until 11th of December with a further request of information. That information was input forward to National Treasury, but a day late on the 12th. And National Treasury at that point in time stated that, you know, it's a day late, hence they will not approve post facto. In January of 2019, the new CPO was appointed, and an appeal letter was submitted to National Treasury. Again, National Treasury confirmed that they cannot approve something after the fact. Honourable Member, in terms of the actual contract, the contract itself was still valid. The approval within the ESKOM environment, which is the delegation, that is what had expired. So in terms of the actual contract with Actum, 2 possibilities for the contract ending. One is the completion of the work or termination. ESKOM did not terminate the contract, neither did the contractor terminate the contract. So as we stand, the contract is still a valid and live contract, except the delegation with respect to this contract is not valid. So in terms of the contracts manager at that point in time, they had done the correct submission. And I want to repeat, it was for time, extension of time only. The delay was not due to Actum themselves, and the culpable contractor, the delay damages was recovered by the team at that point in time to the tune of 190 million rand. So as we stand right now, as I mentioned, when this particular submission was done, 4 of the Kusile units had been completed. The further 5th unit commissioning has completed in November of last year, and there's 1 unit currently outstanding in terms of commissioning. All of the deliveries and installations are complete. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Honourable Member.
Mam Tolashe, are you still there? Mam Tolashe?
Although I could not hear exactly from the gentleman the issue of the fact that this, as part of the AG's report, the AG declared this irregular. So I couldn't hear the gentleman coming closer to explain this, because we know for a fact that the AG does not come at the end of the story. He usually comes in earlier to indicate, but we end up having this contract as irregular by AG, but the official is unable to explain and convince us. For that reason, Chair, because we think if the AG is saying this is irregular, that is it. I'm not sure if there's any other way you can explain it further than that. And I hear the gentleman explaining, but I can't get the sense on why did this happen. If I may, Chair, I heard the CEO. Yes, Chair.
No, you may proceed, Ma. We won't interrupt you. So we are on the plan. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I heard the CEO explaining extensively on the issues of South 32. To an extent, he had covered a very important areas. However, I have suspicion, Chair, that South 32 is being well looked after by ESKOM. And as such, I can say they are being preferred as against other suppliers. I would really want to know how much has been spent by ESKOM on South 32 to date in this contract. And Chair, why should ESKOM go as far as they've done with a private contract that does not necessarily belong to the state? I realize they really have gone out of their way to make sure that they look after this kind of a company by the name of South 32. I really am curious whether this is not happening at the expense of everybody else. Why ESKOM went to an extent of granting relief to a non-governmental entity, if we may be given that information, Chair, because in all the explanation that the CEO gave, it confirms the suspicion that we have. So I really want to get an answer there. Chair, in quarter 4.
Ma'am Josh, let's get a response so it doesn't get lost, and then you can come back to that. Okay. Let's get a response. Yeah.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I would like to ask Snell Nagar again to elaborate on the process regarding the hardship relief or the measures that were put in place to assist South 32 during their financial difficulties. I think it's important to just stress that a Duva power station has inadequate coal handling facilities to be fully supplied from non-mining sources. So the retention of the option to be fed directly from the mine is of critical importance in order to keep coal supply to that mine operational. And this is a legacy design issue that has been with that particular power station since its inception. The South 32 has indicated that they intend to exit the South African coal industry. So they are in the process of, as Snell said, selling their coal interests held in SAEC to Tabong Colliery, which is a subsidiary of Seriti, which is a 90% plus black-owned entity. So we see the continuation of the South 32 contract, or the mining contract at Duva, as strategically important in order to secure, first of all, coal supply, but also in order to ensure that there are not significant job losses due to the closure of that mine as a result of it not being financially sustainable. With that background provided, if I can ask Snell to come in and provide us with further information, please.
Chair, Andre, thank you very much. So absolutely, I think it's important to understand that the power station was designed to receive coal supply from the adjacent colliery next door. And for the last, I don't know, 30, 40 years, whatever it is, you know, ESKOM has been receiving its coal supply from the adjacent mines. So all the infrastructure, the design is meant to receive coal from South 32 or South African Energy Coal. I think it's also important to mention that this coal supply agreement was the cheapest coal supply agreement in the fleet. And so an increase in the price of it, it was about how do we protect that pricing structure that we had of this being the cheapest coal supply agreement in the fleet. In considering getting coal from South 32 or giving them price relief, ESKOM certainly considered other options of coal supply to the power station, and that so besides the adjacent colliery having a transport advantage compared to any other supplier, the reclaim capability of the power station was one of the biggest hindrance, and hence the decision to assist them and give them price relief before to give them price relief, and that price relief is still very competitive to call it your average coal supplies that are being delivered from other sources to Duva Power Station. Chairperson, the other question was, what if we spent year to date in our financial year 2021? We bought 4.8 million tons from South 32 at a cost of 2.4 billion rand. To answer that question, Chairperson, thanks.
All right, Ma'am Tolash, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I am not sure whether I am satisfied with the explanation, because from where I'm seated, if South 32 was the cheapest, how did they realize that without testing the market then? How did they realize that it is the cheapest? I really don't understand the Chairperson. I have a query. I really would want the gentleman or the CEO to come back in trying to further convince us. However, under quarter 4, Honorable Chairperson, Telco 1 was expanded from the initial amount of 2.5 million to 25 million. However, this was rejected by the National Treasury. Now, I just want to hear why was the extender expanded instead of going to the market once again? We know and note the fact that ESKOM withdrew the application as an inquiry was reissued to test the market. But please tell us, what was the outcome of the evaluation after testing the markets? Because ESKOM emphasized on condonation process being underway. Has all these cases been investigated, Honorable Chairperson? That's the question I have for 2019-2020. Thank you.
All right, let's get a response.
Honourable Chair, just in response to the South 32 question, ESKOM is a very large buyer of coal from a significant number of different collieries. We buy either on a cost plus basis or on a fixed price basis, or we buy on a short to medium term contract basis, which typically revolves around the delivery of coal to different power stations. So when Mr. Nagar said that the South 32 price was the lowest in our fleet, he meant that this was the lowest delivered price of any coal contract to any of our power stations. So it was in that context that we were able to ascertain that this particular coal price was in fact substantially lower than the market prices that ESKOM was paying out in terms of those other contracts to other coal suppliers, and hence we believe that the benchmarking conducted was in fact appropriate. Chair, if that answers the question, then with your permission, I would like to request Ms. Byrne to again come in and explain the issues around the telco WAN.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andre. So, Chair, with regard to telco WAN, as I mentioned earlier, we went out on RFP and we had awarded the contract to a number of players. The dark fiber is a specific type of link that's required for our purposes in terms of redundancy, etc. When MTN responded that they did not have the service available at that point in time, we were very aware that there was limited suppliers who would have the service available, and those limited suppliers would be Liquid Telecoms and Dark Fiber Africa. We already had Liquid Telecoms servicing some of those links, and then for backup purposes, we would need another supplier to service those. So we could not see that we would be able to award that to Liquid Telecoms, and that, and therefore we requested from NT to award it to Dark Fiber Africa, which was one of the suppliers within that contract. We then, when NT had then said, when they did not support us, we did go out to market, and indeed the results of that found us to be at a place where we, the results were as we would have expected it, which was that the contract was then awarded to Dark Fiber. Between the time period of requesting this, as I indicated earlier, we started this process in October 2018. So the time period it took between ourselves and the NT conversation, that is when the contract expired, and that's why the condemnation process is underway. I hope that answers the question.
Mamtolashe.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My network is giving me a problem. I did not hear the lady when she was completing her response. However, I'll rely to people who are our scribers. Let me then proceed. Honorable Chairperson, on the matter of the Stephanite basal rate, we have just noted that they have an expansion in the first quarter. Chair, I'm not sure whether ESKOM is aware of the fact that there are allegations that 1 billion in overpayment to the Stephanite Stock Basal Rate JV joint venture relates to unsubstantiated claims as well as compensation events which were agreed and paid without final measurements being done. I just want to hear, Chair, whether this supplier is one of the suppliers that are being investigated, because one of the supplier were overpaid for Kusile. So can we hear whether this is one of the service providers that is being investigated?
Jay, yes, I can confirm that this is one of the contractors that is being investigated. If you require further information, we can ask Mr. Avin Maharaj to come in. The SIU is currently conducting an investigation into this particular contract and the overpayments that are alleged to have been made. Avin, I don't know if you've got anything further that you wish to add to this.
You see, I think to confirm that, yes, the investigations are ongoing. In terms of the actual contract remeasure, that is progressing. Updates have been provided in a different scope of report. The expectation is that by June of this year, we will have that final value determined based on an actual measure at site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. If the question has been responded to, thank you very much. Can we now go to Siemens? Honorable Chairperson, Siemens contract was initially signed in the 2016 for 1.2 billion for 38 months. The contract was modified in December 2017 by 101.6 million. The contract has been modified for 3 times. What is the reason for this modification, Chair? Can I get a response on that one, please, Chair?
All right. I'm not entirely sure which Siemens contract you are referring to. It is not part of the submission tonight. Maybe if you can just give us an indication, then we can try and answer your question, please.
Table 2 on deviations for quarter 1, 2, 3, and Siemens falls under quarter 1, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Jan, can you maybe assist on this one, please?
Honourable Chair, honourable members, I unfortunately do not have the detail on this, so I will commit to make that available within the next day or two to all the members. Thank you, Andre.
Oh, thank you, Chair. If I may proceed, can we get more on when was the contract, Mr. Khalden Hayes Malachi contract, when was it signed? But also, why was it extended? Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Chair, I think the member is asking questions about FY21. We will deal with FY21 in the next batch of expansions and deviations. With your permission, we have prepared tonight for FY20, not for FY21.
No, that's fine. Mamtolashe, we will deal with 2021 in the next set of the meetings of the expansions and deviations. So if you have concluded with the year we're dealing with, we can hand over to members, and then you will have those matters stand over.
I will be fine with that arrangement, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You can be on standby. You and Honorable Mente will come back in the end if there are other matters. Honorable Somya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And honorable members, Minister and the Deputy and the CEO. Mine is a very simple one. On the first expansion note, I think it's note 23 of the 215 million rand extension, where there is assertion that on that extension is only time bound. It's not necessarily financial. I want to get it quite neatly, is that the elasticity of time has no effect on the actual rents and cents, and probably areas of disbursements and so forth that got no effect in terms of the total of that amount. And why would it then be very difficult to deal with a matter which is non-financial within the financial modeled extensions?
Chair, through you. So an expansion refers to either an expansion for time or for money or for both. In this instance, Actum had a contract to provide certain transformer and earthing equipment for Kusile. They were delayed by another contractor. The value of the contract did not increase, so the scope of work did not change. But because the contract initially stipulated a certain period during which the work was completed or was to be completed, and because they were delayed, there was this extension for time that we had to request from National Treasury. So the contract value was not increased pursuant to this request.
That's exactly the point I'm asking, Chair. Where is the difficulty? Because here you are talking about a non-financial instance on work which is at hand, on work which has been handled by the contractor in question, and they have time to finalize that piece of work. Where is the difficulty in terms of handling that a kind of a contractual time extension, one way or the other? That's why I have a problem.
Chair, maybe with respect, that question should be best directed at National Treasury and not at ESKOM. Avin, can you give further detail and clarification on this, please?
Andrea will. So to confirm, exactly what you had said. The National Treasury Standard for the Infrastructure Procurement requests that if you have an increase in either time and or money, then you need to get their approval. In this particular case, it was only for an extension of time. The reason that the contract values did not increase is the contractor is not totally site-based. He only comes in when he gets the access. He does the piece of work and then he leaves, and he would come back for the commissioning activity. So on this particular contract, the original contract monies that were due to him were only paid to him when he had completed those specific activities of work. So the expansion is only due to a time extension, not a value increase. But that's as part of the National Treasury Standard. Either one would trigger a request for NT approval.
So far, how much was spent on that contract by the time of appealing from Treasury for that time extension?
So, Honourable Member, at that point in time, when the original approval was requested from Treasury, which was in October of 2018, the contract value was 215 million, and 205 million of that had been expended. A large portion of the cost is for actual delivery of the equipment. So the minor portions are for actual installation, and then a very small portion for commissioning. At that point in time, all 13 unit transformers had been delivered to site. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Honourable Sonia. Okay, you may proceed.
It's a very interesting thing, Chair, that out of 215 million rand, 205 has been spent already in terms of the supply of materials, and the actual installations was somewhat tend to be processed, and therefore the crucial part by the same contractor in installation was not yet finalized. That's where I really get a problem there. What would then be that loss to ESKOM in this instance, looking into the available materials in terms of supply, the less installation out of that, and therefore the non-approval of that kind of time extension, and the actual less active contract management, which allowed the contract to expire without looking into that time in terms of ensuring that these things actually happen to the end of the actual expense in as far as the totality of the contract is concerned. For me, it's very interesting, a balance.
Yeah. If I may attempt to answer the question, Honourable Chair. So in terms of the ATOM not actually installing and or commissioning their plant, ESKOM's loss would be the loss of warranties and guarantees that are associated with that equipment. In this particular case, as mentioned previously by Mr. Numalo, the delays from that perspective were not as a result of ATOM. It was as a result of the civil works contract. And in that instance, we applied the delay damages that were applicable. In this case, the maximum delay damages for this main civils contract amounted to 190 million rand, which was taken from the civils contractor. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm just still in a SCOPA meeting. We've got a graveyard session. I think we should be rounding up. Once I'll indicate and then check if President is still available. Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll rest my case.
All right, thank you very much. Honorable Hadebe.
No, we had your conversation on the phone, Chair.
My apologies.
No, thanks, Chair. I'd like to make a follow-up on what Umamtolashe raised. Is it South 32? When she raised the question of how did you arrive at the conclusion that you got the lowest price without testing the market? And the response, Chair, given is that they tested the market with the existing contracts. Now, to me, Chair, I want to know, is that the barometer or the measure of market price by testing in-house? And we're not told those contracts that were benchmarked against and how long have they been in operation. And I find it strange that you would benchmark with what you've already had, and then you arrive at the conclusion that you are satisfied and you have tested the market. And the second aspect, Chair, again to South 32, and I think that benchmarking and comparing, it's an unfair comparison, because I am made to understand that the conveyor belt from the mine to ESKOM belongs to ESKOM and is maintained by ESKOM. Therefore, this company does not pay transportation. Now, that's unfair comparing, which explain why their prices is low. Can I get an indication or confirmation that indeed the conveyor belt from the mine to ESKOM does belong to ESKOM and is maintained by ESKOM? That's my first question.
Snell, can you please come in and explain about the conveyor belt?
Sure, Andre, thank you. If I can answer the conveyor belt question first, there is a conveyor belt, so the mine or the colliery or the tied colliery that supplies the power station is adjacent to the power station. So there is a conveyor belt that the mine owns up to a point, and then from that point onwards, which you want to call it the transfer point X, or the point where the risk and rewards of ownership pass, from that point onwards, ESKOM owns it. So I can get the exact details as to what portions of the conveyor belt is owned by who and what. But I think the point you wanted to make is that this particular supplier has a transport advantage compared to any other supplier, and absolutely. So any other coal supplier that you bring, there's a cost of his coal, and then you've got to still transport that coal to the power station. This particular supplier is right next door, so the coal is supplied by a conveyor belt, and there's definitely a transport advantage there. I think
so. Why then you compare apples with bananas and you come to a conclusion that it's the cheapest when circumstances and cost implications are not the same?
Sure. So I think the part that's important to bear in mind on this particular coal supply agreement is that the power station was designed to run on a coal supply from the mine. And the infrastructure at the power station has not been upgraded to receive its full supply from, call it, third-party sources. So there's a reclaim constraint at the power station. That's the first important point. So the power station needs coal supply from the mine. And that's an important factor in the decision that we took to apply to get NT to give them price relief. The second very big important factor, Chairperson, is that there is an existing contract between the two parties, and a party had raised a contractual provision or a hardship clause within that specific contract. And this interim arrangement that we spoke about was there to allow the parties to deal with the contractual clause. If we did not allow that to occur, what would have happened is they would have incurred even bigger financial losses, and they would have switched off the belts and not supplied Duva Power Station. Now, in the very short term, what ESKOM could have done is diverted other coal suppliers to Duva Power Station and supply it with coal. But again, I'm saying the reclaim capability constraint at Duva Power Station limits you to only burning 3 of the 5 units of Duva Power Station. Hence, you had to look at the coal supplier. So there's a physical constraint, there's a contractual issue that you need to deal with, and then the third aspect is that even when you take the coal supply agreement, and what I'm saying is that even if you look at the increase in price of the coal supply agreement that he wants immediately, that compared to our existing coal contracts that we have in feed on a delivered cost basis, still is more beneficial to ESKOM to Duva Power Station than the other suppliers. So I think this thing needs to be looked at multifaceted rather than just with one lens, if I can put it that way to you, Chairperson. Thank you.
Chair, my question has not been answered. I'm saying you are comparing this contract with others when the advantages are not the same. This one has added advantage and there's no transport cost. And the question was, you did not test the market. So anyone that would have come in would have still benefited the same advantages. So the issue that Honorable Tolash was raised is that you did not test the market. And your response is that it's the cheapest compared to others. Yet the advantage and the benefit are not the same. So the argument of comparing with others, of course, others would be expensive because they have transport cost incorporated in their price. You did not test the market. You cannot arrive at the conclusion that this one's the cheapest. Compare apples with apples.
Chairperson, respectfully, absolutely, we didn't test the market because this was.
So therefore, you are correct. Sorry to interject. Therefore, you are correct. You can't. I want you to because if I did not have this information, would have left here with an understanding that indeed they are the cheapest. Yet they've got added advantage. They don't maintain the conveyor belt. It does not belong to them. It belongs to ESKOM. They don't pay transportation. Yet you find it suitable on your side to compare it with others that pays extra. And I'm saying that is unfair comparison.
Chairperson, with due respect, when we do a comparison, you do a comparison on the delivered cost of coal to your power station. So you cannot exclude the transportation element. And absolutely certain coal suppliers will have a transport advantage depending on the location of their colliery, but or even the coal quality for that matter of fact. But the issue at hand is with regards to this particular, call it interim arrangement, it was how do you get coal supply in interim basis while you are doing your analysis and sort of further study. So what we are saying here is that to alleviate ESKOM's interim, call it risk of not receiving coal supply to the power station, these factors were considered: the constraint at the power station, the reclaim capability constraint, the contract that you have at hand, which you got to deal with, and the fact that on a delivered cost basis, which you have to take into account the delivered cost of coal to any power station, this is still the cheaper coal supply across the fleet. And like I given feedback on the bigger 67 billion rand issue on the slides, we did say that ESKOM has gone out on RFP to the market, and we are busy testing it. And the outcome of that RFP we will use to evaluate and ensure favorable, call it, supply option for Duva Power Station in the long term? Thanks, Chair.
But precisely on that point, why must it take National Treasury to tell you to test the market? Why should it be National Treasury that you have to make an application? I think that's where Honorable Hateb is going. Because ordinarily, then this is a way out to say, you know what, the easiest way here is for us really to just bother National Treasury with an application. Why you are engaged in this process not out of your own volition? You are engaged in it because National Treasury was not playing ball correctly so. Otherwise, you would have not bothered. And that's why we keep saying that expansions and deviations are an exception, not a norm. They are not designed for the purposes upon which some of these things that we have heard today are. I think, Honorable Hateb, I'm ventilating the way you are going. If I'm wrong, I'm running parallel to it.
No, no,
that's
yes,
precisely the point.
Spot on, Chair, spot on, spot on.
In fact, Chair, all the explanation that the gentleman is giving is make us to confirm that this 32 something is getting a special treatment from ESKOM. As he further explains, he exposes the fact that this 32 something is South 32, I'm sorry, is getting an extraordinary way to be dealt with at the expense of everybody else. So it confirms our suspicion, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you.
Yes, because I'm interested in knowing the extent of capital expenditure to ESKOM in relation to this.
Chairperson, if we can separate the two applications that's before us. So like I said, the first application, the expansion, was to deal with an interim arrangement. Now, when we look at the longer term solution, that is a colliery that was designed to supply Duva Power Station. In order for ESKOM to negotiate or to understand or to talk or to renegotiate, it needs to apply to National Treasury first for the deviation. Hence we made the application before we could actually start talking to them, which NT denied. Now, so that's the reason why we made the application to NT, because you've got to make the application before you talk to them. Secondly, we in talking to them and in renegotiating this contract, we have to take this, understand what they can do versus what the market can do. So hence, like I said, we've also gone out to the market to test the market. So they two applications. They're not. It's not that we wanted to do one and not the other. Both would have been done, but on this particular case, it was an application, like I said, to negotiate and to talk to South 32 in terms of what's possible with regards to that coal supply agreement. And then even went further and saying that where we had initially thought that we were going to potentially look at a 14-year agreement, which is what we currently have on the table, circumstances have materially changed. And so we don't think a 14-year agreement is possible in any event anymore. So that's the reason why we applied to National Treasury for the application. With regards to the capital question, this is a fixed price coal supply agreement, and hence there is no capital spent on South 32 or the Duva coal supply agreement contract. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Hateb, are you through?
Thanks, Chair. I'll come back. But what also disturbed me, Chair, I think it's on slide 4, National Treasury reference number 23. I think it's Q1, where ESKOM says to us the contract did not expire. Yet the National Treasury note I think it's slide number 4, if I'm not mistaken. Slide number 4 is National Treasury recommendation. The contract had expired at the time of the request, yet ESKOM constantly say to us the contract has not expired. When you look into the recommendation, the condonation process has initiated. Now, which is which? Was the contract expired at the time, or the contract had not expired? Can I just get a clarity?
Alvin, if you can explain, please. It seems Alvin has dropped off. Becky, are you still on the line?
Yes, Andre, I'm still here. I can go for it. I think Avin might be having some connecting problem. I think here, I think the complication is two, that contractually the contract between ESKOM and ACTOM, it's a different matter between now the governance issues within the ESKOM process. What I mean by that is that the contractor, because of the delays, from contractual process, the contractor is entitled to claim the time. So based on that, I think that's what Avin meant when he saying that contract then between the two parties has not expired, but the internal governance between the ESKOM and the National Treasury, where the 1 month extension was granted, that's what caused the dilemma between the two contracts, between the laws that govern the contract laws itself and then the internal and National Treasury, between National Treasury and ESKOM, where then we have this situation where the contract with the contractor is based on the contractual arrangement is still valid, but internally, hence then the condonation process has to be initiated to condone that transaction that National Treasury said they couldn't extend when the team went back to them on the 12th of December 2018 instead of the 11th, Chair. I think that's a difficulty that we are having in dealing with the two issues that govern this transaction, Chair. Thanks.
Chair, Becky to Becky.
Okay.
Becky to Becky. The contract or a project has a start and an end date. You enter into contractual agreement, and if there are delays, unforeseen, you extend the contract. Even that extension has an end date. The question that I'm asking, National Treasury is adamant that the contract had expired at the time of the request. Was the contract expired at the time of request? The issue of claiming the extension, that only becomes effective when you have agreed on the extension.
Honorable Chair, if I may come in, I think the honorable member is correct. The contract has got time, but like I was explaining, Chair, that because of the delays, contractually, the contractor has claimed the time delays from ESKOM, which then contractually it was approved by ESKOM because of the, hence, Chair, in terms of the damages, then ESKOM went back to the contractor that caused the delay, which was the civil contractor, and claimed that maximum 190 million to the party. This contractor, from the time that they've requested extension for, that extension was granted contractually. And then the issue was then the internal processes, which were, I think the pity was that National Treasury granted 1 month after the October request. which then did not give the team the time at the time to conclude the relevant information to submit it by the 11th of December. They missed it by a day, and then National Treasury could not then approve that. But contractually, between the contractor and ESKOM, ESKOM have approved that time extension for the contractor, which then extended the contract. Chair.
No, so you are agreeing that you have missed by a day, you have submitted after the expiry date.
Chair, the original submission to NT was submitted before the expiry date, Chair. It was the subsequent submission, because then the note that came from National Treasury was saying that they gave that extension of 1 month, and then coming back with a clarification, then they would then consider, which then the team after at that time then returned to National Treasury a day later. But the submission was done in October, Chair, and then the expiry was in December. So it was, the initial submission was done before the contract expired.
Honorable Chair, are you still there?
You know I am.
Yeah, no, I'm convinced, Chair, there are deep-seated challenges, especially when yes, I'm saying there are deep-seated challenges, especially when it comes to contract management. You have team of consultants within each and every project. You have a project leader, you have a client representative, you have site meetings, you have site progress meeting, you get variation orders. All these things, Chair, are built into a project, and from time to time, you amend your program accordingly based on the delays and challenges that you experience on site. But here, it seems as if such does not exist. Basics project management skills are lacking. You cannot do things on the 11th hour and then make excuses that somehow because of the delays and internet. It's a clear, typical example of lack of project management, Chair. That's all I can say in this regard, and I can tell that I'm not going to get the satisfactory answers. So instead of I don't know how to put it. Yeah, no, I'm
all right, Honorable Mawote, and then Honorable Swart.
I'm fishing in the shower, Chair.
Yeah, all right. Honorable Mawote and Honorable Swart.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I want to agree with the previous speaker, Honorable Hade, with that. There's a serious project management problem at ESKOM. And he is right on the issue of South 32 to say that ESKOM has put South 32 at the competitive edge over other suppliers because they are assisting them by maintaining the conveyor belt. And for that, you cannot therefore say that South 32 is cheap. But let me park that one because we'll never get an answer for that. Now, earlier on, you did mention that the speaker, the presenter did mention that there was a relief. The South 32 received a relief because it had indicated that they are having hardships. Now, based on the relief that was given by ESKOM, what's in it for ESKOM? This is business. You give this person a relief fund of so much money, but what is it that you get back as ESKOM? That will be my first question, Chair, and I'll wait for the answer.
Chair, what we got back from South 32 was the supply of coal. Without the relief offered, what would have happened was that South 32 would have entered business rescue, and they would have ceased the supply of coal. And then, of course, there would have been the attendant associated negative consequences such as job losses And once a mine is closed, it's very difficult to reopen that mine. And that would have seriously compromised supply of coal to Duva, which could then have led to those units not being available or only available at excessive cost, which would then have increased the risk to the generation system overall.
But CEO, you are shedding off jobs right now at ESKOM as you speak. You did come here and say that you've let go of 2,000 employees and you're letting go of more people. So
on an entirely voluntary basis. That's
fine, but that's job losses, right? Do you agree?
Honourable Chair, if people wish to accept packages to move entirely at their own volition, there's no pressure that's brought to bear on them, then that would suggest that they have the opportunity to find employment elsewhere, or they have other plans that fit in better with their personal aspirations. But we are not forcibly retrenching at ESKOM.
No, I never said retrenching, I said job losses. But anyway, let me move. Chair, in the interest of time, I'm going to club some of the issues that I came across. So when you look at the health services that you say you wanted to expand the contract on, and you said the reason for that is to maintain business continuity. I mean, in this country, how many health companies are offering these health services? And why did you wait for the contract to come to an end to want to expand it? How long was the contract in existence before you came and wanted to expand on it? And why didn't you, when you see that the contract is left with maybe under a year, start the process, the tendering process of sourcing another supplier?
Philip, can you come in on this one, please?
Yes, Chair. So in this case, the contract was still in existence, so it had not come to an end. We just wanted to continuity to make sure that we continue offering the services and just have continuity with the same service supplier. But that was not approved, so that was fine. We then moved on, and we are currently making use of what is in place, because most of these employees are based at power stations, so they work at power stations, but they would have to come to a central place in Boshaville for the health services, for the evaluation of their whether they are still fit to continue with their work. So that has since been left. We just thought it was a good idea at the time, but I think this way has afforded us some additional efficiencies that we can make use of. Currently.
Wait. No. You see, this is precisely why there's a problem. You just wanted to. It was convenient. It was easy. I'm not sure whether you are hearing yourselves, because the one suggestion I'm going to make is that take the time to go back to this hearing and listen to the responses that you are giving. Reflect on whether they indicate a commitment. I still maintain the expansions in 1, 2, and 3 of 2020-2021. ESKOM has got the highest applications insofar as National Treasury is concerned. So these responses, I'm sitting here very patiently, and I'm just letting this slide so that it can just be a reflection on the just the willy-nilly approach to say, what, it's okay. If things come to a head, there's always a deviation option, there's always an expansion option. I mean, just the response being given now summarizes the entire attitude of why we are where we are. And it's just actually quite unacceptable, to say the very least. It speaks to an attitude which just worries me. It doesn't sit well. It doesn't reflect well at all. And yeah, I'm the chairperson of the board. Yeah, at some point we'll have to. We're going to have to relook at this. But the response that's just been given now, in fact, I would say you don't even continue down the road which you are continuing, because you are actually just hardening our outlook insofar as why we take a dim view on the expansions and deviations that you are speaking about. Sorry about that interruption, Honorable. You can proceed.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. I'm equally pained by what I just heard. And anyway, you've summarized it, Chair, but I just want to be on record that it's not only the health services, Chair, it's even the security services. The request to expand from 886 million to a further 400, meaning another half of what they got. That's what we're dealing with here. And then you've got another one where it wants to move from 80 million by another 76 million. So what exactly are we dealing with here? So in this 80 that you are given, 80 million that you are given, the contract ran and it is now coming to an end, this one. You want to expand it by another 76 million rands, denying everybody else who's in the market who could be looking to get these services. And the reason given is continuity of service. There's no emergency, there's nothing except continuity of service. That is what we have been told here. Can I get a response? Why is this being done? Health services, security service, even catering services, by the way. The next one is catering service that they wanted to expand. And then the reason, please go down to catering service, because there's a problem with the reason given there. Funds depleted. How? How were the funds depleted and then you want to expand? Can we get an explanation of what's going on here? Catering service, original value 31 million, expansion value 15.2 million, reason for deviation, funds depleted. Please, can I get the response? What's going on?
Philip, if you can give an explanation how the funds were depleted, please.
This was as a result of poor contract management, because additional services were added onto the contract without following the process. So this is the one where I indicated that disciplinary action was taken against the contract manager because of poor contract management.
What kind of discipline was taken? Disciplinary process. What does that mean? It's broad strokes. It's thematic. Nitty-gritty would help. What kind of action are we talking about here?
So, the contract manager was charged, and he was given a 6-month written warning for the transgression.
For this kind of blunder, the 6 months written warning. I mean, just momentarily, just listen to that. Yes. BP, honestly speaking. But Honorable Maweto, proceed.
Yeah, my last one will be, Chair. Can we go to the telco one? The initial contract was 2.5 million, and you made an application to want to move it by 23 million. What was the change there? What would have brought the amount from 2.5 to 23? Is it a scope expansion? What is it?
Right, please explain the additional scope.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Member. So this originally the suppliers that responded, one of the suppliers that were allocated the dark fiber links is MTN. We suspect that, well, no, let me not go with suspecting. Let's just say that they, after being awarded, so a number of suppliers were awarded the contract for the different links. Now, dark fiber is a specific high-tech link that is required. When we were onboarding the suppliers, the MTN who was awarded this link, one of these links, they wrote us a letter indicating that they are now unable to provide the link. They had also quoted the links at a figure that for us was much less than what a dark fiber link figure would be quoted at. They said that they did not have the ability to provide that service at the time. So therefore, we needed to get that service so that we could provide the redundancy. In other words, we could provide the backup services for those links. And for that reason, we approached NT, but subsequently had gone out to tender for these for this supply of the service.
You went to NT, and what did NT say?
Okay, so we went to NT to ask them to award this to an expansion to dark fiber Africa. NT had not supported it and asked us to go out to market. We could not get this from Liquid Telecoms, which was one of the other suppliers that would provide the service because of its technical nature. We knew that the offerings would possibly come from Liquid Telecoms and from Dark Fiber Africa. We couldn't get it from Liquid Telecoms because that would not give us the backup requirements because we had Liquid Telecoms already in its architecture.
So essentially, National Treasury said go out to the market.
They said go out to the market. We appealed that, but whilst we appealed that, we did go out to market. And then the results of that market was the award to Dark Fiber, and that contract was affected in this January.
It surprises me why it has to always take National Treasury for you to go to the market. It's baffling, actually.
So
I would imagine that the National Treasury should not be turning down these requests on the basis of that you have not tested the market, because quite frankly, it's elementary. It's procurement 101. It's a constitutional and PFMA injunction. It's not discretionary. It's law. National Treasury must be dealing with these things and turning them down on seriously fundamental issues. Now, to say go and test the market, I mean, if you just listen to tonight, it's a refrain. Go and test the market, go and test the market. What must it take for it to sink in substantively at ESKOM that this is what you have to do? It's not optional. Because this is precisely how corruption begins to encroach and creep in. Because these sort of things where there's an appointed somebody who is eyed and prepared is exactly to say, no, we will go to that one. No, guys, We can't be sitting here and when we ask what did National Treasury say, and you said, go and test the market. I'm not even sure. No, that on its own, if there's anything that you must take away from this meeting, is that we are not going to accept now that you are going to flippantly want to bypass testing the market and expect National Treasury to condone this kind of thing on your part. If we have to come back here and deal with that thing that National Treasury had to say, go and test the market, then I kid you not, we're not going to have a good time. Deviations and expansions for the umpteenth time. And if it means this becomes our refrain until you get it, then we will. Are an exception and not a norm. And might I add, they are not a conduit for you to engage in an I don't care, laissez-faire attitude approach to procurement. Subject yourselves to process. This is just totally unacceptable. It can't be coming from an entity as big and as serious as ESKOM, that you would approach National Treasury and be dismissed and turned down on a basic elementary thing, test the market. It can't be. We need to be coming here dealing with complex and substantive responses from National Treasury, which we have to, even be confused by, to say, right, the issues here were thoroughly dealt with. But a simple thing like go and test the market. No. No. Take us seriously. Take this process of expansions and deviations seriously. They are not a last-minute resort to poor planning, to oversight insofar as what you should have done and you didn't do. They are not a default position to cover up for your shortcomings. The whole night we are sitting here, and at every material point when the question is put, what did National Treasury say? Said, test the market. Something which should be elementary at ESKOM and any other entity for that matter. But an entity as big as this one, we are told 3,000 people in procurement. 3,000. This thing must stop. Honorable Mawoto, you may proceed, and then we will go and to the next. Honorable Hadebe had a question, but quite frankly, this is totally unacceptable. Here waiting for substantive reasons why National Treasury. Why?
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I fully concur with what you've just said. Now, on this very same telco one, the presenter who was just responding now, the way you are responding to me, it says to me as a project manager, here we are dealing with parceling. In project management, there's something called parceling. Parceling is when you buy a car without an engine. And then you say, but I can't use the car because there's no engine. You say you've awarded this work to different entities, including MTN and Liquid. And then later on, they said, no, we can't do this. And hence the reason for you now to want to expand by a further 23 million. And parceling, I just want to caution you, is punishable by law because you misled the people who are adjudicating here. You went to buy a product that you know you cannot use it if you don't have one or two or three things. That's one. Two, you have denied other people an opportunity because when you went out on tender initially, you say it's additional scope. Initially, that scope was not there. So the people who responded only on the scope that you went out for. And now later on, you want to include that scope on the people now that you've awarded. So you've done your own shortlisting and you want to now give this work to only these few people that you've shortlisted. And now they can't do it. They're asking you for a further 23 million. Why is that happening? Thank you, Chair. That will be my last question. I hope I'll get an answer.
All right, let's get a response to that.
Thanks, Chair. Just for clarification purposes, Chair, the respondents indicated that they could provide the service, all the respondents. One of the respondents, MTN, responded after the award, sent us a letter to backtrack on the response and basically inform us that they are unable to provide the service to us. The extension, or as it's phrased here, the additional scope, was meant for one of the other suppliers in the full contract. Because one of the suppliers who had indicated to us, so we were misled, not we misled, the supplier misled us by responding and saying that they can provide the service. Once they were awarded, they then said they couldn't provide the service. When they informed us that they couldn't provide the service, we requested what we term here as the additional scope to be given to one of the other suppliers, not the same supplier, one of the other suppliers whom we knew would have the capability, having gone through the process of the RFP, because the other suppliers had responded and said they didn't have the capability. So that was the request that we put into a National Treasury. So in no way did we want to circumvent any processes or mislead. We as ESKOM were actually misled. I trust that answers it, Chair.
Right. Honorable Hart Devin.
Chair, don't forget me.
Who is that?
It's Swartz, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Sister. Over to you, Honorable Hart Devin. Honorable Hart Devin.
No problem.
Sure.
No problem.
Honorable Swartz, over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Chair, mine is on turnover mining, that it was one of the companies that was involved on overpayments. Has this been recovered? When was it recovered and how much? And the turnover contract was supposed to be concluded in 2016. 3 expansions have been granted. Has work been concluded on this contract? Why are there delays? And how much were the expansions? Thank you, Chair.
Right. I suspect that may be 2021, but let's see if there's a response.
Yeah, Chairman, it's Avin Maharaj. I'll respond on the first part of the question. So the investigations are proceeding with respect to turnover in terms of the recoveries. The assessments are also in progress with the SIU for that recovery. To answer the question, there are 3 contracts in place at Kusile, 2 of which have been completed. And there is a third contract that is still in progress. And this is for the conveyor systems on each of the respective units. So the work that is currently being undertaken is the commissioning of the conveyor systems for unit number 4, and then construction work on units 5 and 6. In terms of the deviations, I don't have the exact figures with me, and undertake to provide them at that next session where we deal with the turnover deviations and/or expansions to address. Hopefully I've addressed the questions around the investigations.
Honorable Swart, can I request that you park that one right? Honorable Hateb.
Chair, I would like to, is National Treasury available, Chair?
National Treasury is here.
Yes, Chair. I would like to get a response from them, and also in relation to ESKOM procurement policies that are in place. The question to National Treasury, don't you have a limit in terms of the percentage of expansion where one is allowed to expand from the original contract value? Now, meaning from the original contract, what percentage is allowed for you to expand the contract? And if you do have that percentage, can you please indicate to us what is that percentage, and under what circumstances is one allowed to exceed the prescribed minimum percentage in terms of expansion? Chair, I'm raising this in relation to Section 217 of the Constitution, which states, and I quote, when an organ of state in the national, provincial, or local government sphere, or any other institution identified in national legislation, contracts for goods or services, it must do so in accordance with a system which is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. Now, we have seen here expansion that are 90% more than the original contract value. Others are 100% above. And that I do not think it's in line with the prescript of Section 217 of the Constitution. So I'd like National Treasury to give us a sense in terms of the legislation and circulars that they prescribe to these state entities. Also, to hear from ESKOM in terms of their procurement policy. Don't they have such a limit? And why do we have such contracts where are close to more than 100% of the original contract value? Thank you, Chair.
Right, can we get an answer?
Good evening, Chair, and good evening to the honorable members. Chairperson, through you, if you can allow me not to switch on my video for the purposes of bandwidth. Chair, there is no limit that is prescribed currently on the percentage of a modification of a contract, an expansion or an extension of the contract. What is in place are thresholds that the modifications can be done and approved by the accounting officer or the accounting authority of a particular institution. And once the modification goes above those thresholds, and then it comes to National Treasury. And the reason why it comes to National Treasury, Chairperson, is particularly for those reasons, to look at the extent to which the expansion is required and the justification for that particular expansion, and to actually look at sometimes the reasonableness of that expansion. So that's why you would see that an example that was provided of the contracts that National Treasury we only granted for a month, and that is the mechanism that we use, that once we realize that the services or the product that is required is critical for service delivery, we would allow for the expansion or extension of a contract, but for a limited period of time, and require the institution, at the moment ESKOM, to then go out on open market to establish the long-term contract if the services are still required. This is important to make sure that we uphold those 5 key principles of public procurement as required by the PFMA and ultimately our constitution, Chairperson. And it is quite important that for us, ESKOM, prior to requesting National Treasury for these deviations or for expansions, to have done the appropriate due diligence and satisfy themselves that the deviations and expansions that they submit to the National Treasury are truly an exception rather than a norm, and are not a solution to poor contract management or poor planning and so forth. But many a times, Chairperson, we do find ourselves in positions where we have to consider the continuity and the provision of service delivery, Chair. I hope that answers the question, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Honorable Member. Siyagqiba ngoku.
Sozolala Somiyo.
Right,
Chair,
Honorable Member, you're the last one on this one.
yes, Chair. Chair, on the last one, you know, on the deviations, as you said, I will come back later. On the deviations that we dealt with earlier on, I left everything that had been suspended simply because National Treasury had a concern and directed ESKOM somewhere else or to do something. So there is reference number 88 on IPPs. I have 2 questions. One, they suspended the project. Who is now generating that surplus energy? How are they doing it? Number 2, National Treasury is having a concern on the different service providers, but most importantly is the value that was going to be derived by ESKOM. Can the CEO expatiate on the value that ESKOM receives from IPPs? If the original value was going to be 513 million, what is ESKOM's gain from that? Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Let's get a response to that.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Sekhamotso, if you can briefly just explain the process by which IPP power is procured, and in particular, the fact that the commercial negotiations per se are not conducted by ESKOM, but rather through the IPP office, which reports into the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Chairman and honorable members. I trust I am audible. So I will talk on the process and then on the issue around the process that was suspended. So in terms of the new generation regulations, the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy is the authority to decide how new generation capacity is to be procured. And in terms of the IPP program, the general approach is where the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy through the IPP office plays the role of the procurer. So they basically run the procurement process, get the necessary approvals, and then ESKOM acts as the buyer and the contract manager for this contract. As Andre has indicated, ESKOM is not involved in the commercial negotiations for the IPPs. Essentially, we administer those purchase agreements. So that is the first point. And then secondly, in relation to the question by the member around who is generating the surplus power and so on, the process that get initiated comprised 3 short-term procurement programs, 2 of which were open market competitive tenders, and the third, which is the one referred here on the Section 34 IPP additional power program, we had proposed a single source approach, and it was targeting those IPPs that are already connected and generating, and the proposal was to approach them directly to say, if you have capacity to generate more, can you please make that available? And National Treasury did not support that approach. What has subsequently happened is we suspended that program from the ESKOM perspective. However, we then approached the DMRE and the IPP office to say, as you were also going through a parallel process for the risk mitigation IPP program, can you look at whether we can get additional capacity from the existing IPPs that are generated today? So that program is now being handled by the DMRE, and I'm sure they can account at some stage as the status. The reason, person that we had approached this is if members recall, this is around early 2020. We had very severe supply constraints and load shedding in December, and we're looking for options to try to get additional capacity quickly. And so there were short-term initiatives that ESKOM was going to embark on, and then there were others that were being run by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Chairperson.
No, there is a part of my question you did not answer. The value which ESKOM derives from this energy which is generated by IPPs, because that's the major concern which National Treasury had flagged in rejecting this particular request.
Thank you, Honorable Member. If I can make that, what proposal we had put on the table for this specific transaction is as follows. We have a number of different IPPs producing through different technologies for prices that we know that have been through the DMR. And some of those prices, I think as members may be aware, are fairly high, and there's a lot of work to look at how that can be improved, which the DMRE is leading on that. The proposal we had put on the table was a ceiling price of around 37 cents per kilowatt hour. And this was informed by an analysis of the ESKOM cost of generation, taking into account that the proposal was to say for the long-term contracts that are in place, those contracts include clearly primary energy, although the bulk of it is renewable, so it's fairly low. There's capital that has been invested in setting up the infrastructure and other operating costs. What we had proposed was a fraction of the current price on the basis that there should be no new capital investment required. It should really be just a question of optimizing the existing facility. For those potential IPPs that wanted to or felt they may need to invest in new infrastructure, there was a separate program that would have made provision for that. So the cost that was proposed as a ceiling price of around 37 cents per kilowatt hour was based on an analysis of the total ESKOM cost of generation. And if one excludes capital costs, which technically are sunk, and you look at the variable cost, this was the figure that felt would be fair and competitive. It's a ceiling. However, National Treasury felt that they didn't understand how we arrived at that figure. And in any event, they did not support a procurement model of going single source. And therefore, we then said from the ESKOM perspective, let us suspend this program and let DMRE then run with it as appropriate. I trust I have covered the question, Chairperson. Thank you.
All right.
Now, Chair, last thing, if DMRE is then running with the project, who is footing the bill?
Chairperson, as things stand, the procurement by DMRE, once it is concluded, will flow through the electricity tariff to the end customers. And in essence, for ESKOM, there is no direct benefit. As I said, we are just an administrator of those contracts. So the bill is footed by the customer, Chairperson. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Chair.
Yebo.
Now, I'm going to request that we move this particular item to next week as well, so that National Treasury can also expatiate on why were they having a concern on the derivement of value. Because if this is the case, the official also just confirmed that, as we know, some of these prices in terms of IPPs are very high. And it doesn't make business sense for ESKOM, who have made it, who have made a promise to ensure that they are saving every cent they have on their turnaround strategy. But they will still be procuring this, even if it's going to be done by DMRE. If the person who fits the bill is going to be ESKOM, the question, the bottom line is, what value is that to ESKOM? Is it the expenditure that is making business sense, or is it an expenditure that does not make business sense? Because I do not think National Treasury will cite such an a concern. Yet, it's a concern that is not a serious one. There are fundamental problems and deeply rooted issues when it comes to this particular deviation. So Chair, let them not answer now. Next week when they come back, please, this one must be part of their work that they are going to bring, and National Treasury must then explain to us what were their concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Member, are you still there?
Oh, I got
Honorable Member?
Chair?
All right, now we'll flag that issue for next week. Yes, no, it's fine. We'll flag that issue for next week. It's not a problem. Colleagues, I think we can somehow come to an end. I just have one question and I'll be done. The other issues that I have, I'll flag for next week because I think they are cross-cutting in any case and will still be relevant to the purposes of a discussion around the annual report. Just one question. Are there any expansions or deviations at any time, including the current year, 2020-2021, that you have applied for to National Treasury, and National Treasury has turned down, but you proceeded with them regardless. I just want that into the record. Hello?
Chair, I don't have that information to hand right now. With your permission, what I suggest is that we cover this at the session following the following week. Then we can give you a comprehensive answer on that.
Is the chair still around?
Sorry about that. My network chucked me out. But it's just one question I had. And no, sorry, my network had chucked me out. I've just come back in again. Okay. Sorry about that. Just one question, really. Both, and then I think we will be done. The other issues I have will be for I'll defer the of the annual report. So that is the record, whether it's the year we are dealing with now or the current year, 2021. Are there any expansions or deviations that you applied for at National Treasury and National Treasury did not grant, turned down, but you proceeded with them regardless? Has such an eventuality arisen at ESKOM? I may not be looking for specific details now, but has such happened?
Chair, in order again to be precise with the information that we give you, with your permission, can we confirm what the exact status is so that there's no potential for misunderstanding, and that we then revert to this committee at our session next week and respond to this question when we report to you again.
All right, no, that's fine. With the proviso then that if we're not going to get a response now, because for me it was really a yes or no, I was not looking for the specifics yet. In that case, can then the full schedule be brought next week as to whether that has happened, and if it has, in what instance did it happen? Because National Treasury has raised with us that departments and entities at times just don't give two hoots in hell as to whether a deviation has been granted or not. And so that kind of transgression for us is very serious. And so we will be raising that matter with every entity and department. And that's why I was leaving it for the end. Colleagues, there are, I'm sure, quite a number of still other substantive matters which you would have wanted to raise. I'm going to request that we, and maybe then National Treasury, on the same question, if you are aware of any expansion or deviation that you did not approve, which ESKOM proceeded with.
Chair, we don't have that information with us at hand. We would also request to provide any in the next meeting next week. Thank you.
All right, so no, that's fine. I want to conclude by saying just two things and we are done. One, members have raised their serious concern about these hearings being virtual, and we will therefore be engaging with Parliament because as we have capabilities for the purposes of physical meetings, and the chamber itself is taking 166 members at this point, not the full complement of 400. And committee rooms, we are aware, have been prepared and are being prepared for the purposes of physical meetings or hybrid meetings. So to give you a heads up, ESKOM, we are exploring that avenue as a committee because this virtual setup has got very serious limitations in the course of work that we are doing. So in the event that such an arrangement is being made, you will be advised of that in due time once we have gotten the green light from the presiding officers to do so. We will meet next week, as we agreed this morning, for all the other matters, and request that if there is any confusion, there is any uncertainty, there is no clarity, that we deal with those matters timeously. I saw one media house being exuberantly colorful and saying that we have buckled under the pressure of the minister. That kind of characterization is inconsistent with the cooperative spirit which is embodied and engendered in this committee. So that was quite unfortunate, but be that as it may, news sells, and so sensationalism as well must characterize that kind of writing which I saw earlier on this afternoon, which was quite regrettable and quite sad actually. But be that as it may, we have arrived at an arrangement that we will meet next week, which I think was not anybody buckling under anybody's pressure, but it was a mutual understanding. And I think the committee members expressed themselves rather sufficiently on that matter this morning. So we will meet next week. Colleagues, we've got a family meeting tomorrow, so nobody's appearing before us. We'll be doing in-house matters. And since we finished late, Sister, may I request that we start at 10 tomorrow and not the usual 9:30, and then dispense with the outstanding internal committee matters which we have to finalize. Colleagues, thank you very much for your resilience and your hard work and your commitment to the work that has been given to us. I think that siyaqhuba asimanga futhi asiqhube more reverse. I'd like to thank the minister, the deputy minister, chairperson of the board, and board members, CEO and executives, National Treasury, and all our guests. We want to thank you very much. Today, I would like to believe that the meeting has come to an end unless there's any other matter which needs to be raised at this point in time. Going once, going twice, going thrice, sold to the highest bidder. Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.
That was a long session.